keep your no obligation review at 888-988-JOSH. And when we return, we'll talk about A, B, and D. We kind of jumped around a little bit because how I viewed it is you have F, G, and N as kind of one category. Then you have C as another. So F, G, and N, I call it kind of the Cadillac. You got C is sort of like struggling to make ends meet. Maybe you don't have enough money to afford the F, G, and N plans. They're very budget conscious, so you got to watch, the network situation, like Danielle was saying. Then you have these K, L, and M. They're kind of more obscure cost-saving mechanism. Next, we're going to go to A, B, and D. When we return, this is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback, and call us at 888-988-JOSH during the break. 888-988-JOSH for the no obligation 45-minute ultimate financial blueprint. And we'll throw in Danielle Roberts' book, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes You Can't Afford to Make. This is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback. And we're back with Danielle Roberts, arguably one of the best, most clear, probably one of my 2 or 3 favorite guests of all time on Medicare. I would love you to rank, do you rank your competitors? Because there's like a Medicare circuit nationwide. Are there any people that you're like, that's a really good Medicare expert? But I would say you're probably my top 3 of all time on Medicare in making it clear and concise. Anybody who do you say, oh, they're really good, or is it?
Yeah, in my world, you have everything from your local broker that still runs kitchen table appointments to call centers like we are. And of course, we have friendships with agencies all around the nation. Down in the Florida area, Medicare FAQ is a great agency that has worked with us and been friends with us for quite some time. I know Boomer Benefits, we are not in New York, so we refer to a great agent that we know of that does business in that state. And I would say that if you're working with someone independent, you're going to be in good shape. It's really important that when you're first enrolling in Medicare, you're considering all of the options. And you don't want somebody that might be only working, let's say, with 1 or 2 carriers who's going to try to steer you into those plans because that's what they have to offer. So you should start your Medicare research early, 6 months or so before you turn 65 to really get a good feel for all the differences that we're talking about here today, Josh. And then work with an independent broker that can help you with making those decisions.
Yeah, and I know George has worked, Georgia works with us. He has a connection with Boomer Benefits. So folks, call us at 888-988-JOSH and he can hook you up with one of Danielle's expert agents. We've gotten very positive feedback from anybody who's gone for the show, and we really won't get anything for it. But just want to be there as a resource to our listeners. No, what I was also mentioning, although that's a good answer, other books, like you have your book, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes. We're giving that away at 888-988-JOSH. Any other books you like on the subject of Medicare?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, of course, AARP has their own book, which is Medicare for Dummies. And so that is a really very deep dive read that kind of covers everything you could imagine about Medicare from one end to another. It may be something that could be a little bit overwhelming to someone that's new, but it would be a great book to have as a resource. So let's say you needed to look up something like how to file a grievance because the doctor that you went to had an office wasn't clean, or it covers all the really deep things like that. And it's a great resource book. Our book, of course, focuses more on some of the more common mistakes that people make. And therefore, it's a great read when someone's coming into age 65, because that's usually what they're looking for is there's so much information here. My mailbox is full of all these things. My phone's ringing off the hook. How could I have this many choices? How do I not make a mistake? And so 2 different kinds of books, but both have very good resources in there and information as well.
Oh, yeah. And there was another one we had over the year. Get What's Yours for Medicare. That was a book that we had on here.
Yeah, I actually have that one myself. And it's another great resource and was written by a journalist that has a ton of Medicare background. And mine's a hard copy, so you can get that book in hard copy.
Yeah, and call us today, 888-988-JOSH, if you want the 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes book, which I like because I believe it was more updated than most of the other ones, updated 2020. So some of these books go back like 2016, and things could change. So you want to get the 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes book, call us at 888-988-JOSH. So we're going to talk about A, B, and D. Then I'm going to talk about like weird scenarios. You know, people say, well, I'm still working. Should I stay with Medicare? I got a listener question email, buddy of mine who said, hey, I have a question for Danielle. But first, let's go with A, B, and D. Everybody kind of has that, but some people still don't know what it is. So if you could go through that.
Yeah. And again, here's where we have that alphabet soup within Medicare. You have original Medicare parts, A and B, A being hospital and B being outpatient. And then Medigap plans, which are Medicare supplements. There's also a Medigap Plan A and Plan B. Medigap Plan A is the Medicare supplement with the least benefits. So it's going to cover the 20% that Medicare doesn't cover on your outpatient Part B expenses, but it doesn't cover your hospital deductible. It doesn't cover the outpatient deductible. It doesn't cover excess charges or foreign travel. And one of the most important ones that it doesn't cover is the skilled nursing facility coinsurance. So if you have a stay in a skilled nursing facility, Medicare only covers the first 20 days. The last 80 days of a $100 or 100-day allowable skilled nursing visit, you would be paying, I think it's $185.50 per day right now, and these numbers always go up a little bit each year. So if you ever needed to stay in a skilled nursing facility, that could get quite expensive. But you might look at Medigap Plan A if you're really sold on Medigap and the security of always having the 80-20 between Medicare and your supplement, and see what the rate is. Compare that against a Plan N and see if the savings is enough to warrant the risk of not having those things covered.
So you have A, you have B, D. What's D?
So Medicare Part D is drugs. That's your drug coverage benefits. But then, of course, there's Medicare Supplement Plan D, which, again, less than 1% of people choose A, B, D, KLM, and KLM. If you did a Medigap Plan D, it's going to cover everything except for the Part B deductible and excess charges. So very similar to Plan N, but you wouldn't have the co-pays of the doctor or the ER. Your Medigap plan would pay that for you. Okay.
And so is it generally safe to say if you got the money, go G, and if you're kind of struggling financially, go C? I'm trying to be oversimplified here, but...
Yeah, if you really like the idea of a Medigap plan, and Plan G, if you have the funds for it, of course, is going to be the most comprehensive. If you really need a break on the premiums, then we recommend Plan N, as you're going to have lower premiums for taking on a little bit more. But let's just say you're living on Social Security, and there's no way you could afford a Medigap plan because even $100 a month is not doable on your budget. Then looking for a Medicare Advantage plan in your area, one with a nice low premium. You might be able to find one with a zero premium if you're unless you're out in a rural area where they're less common. You could look for a plan like that and just make sure that your doctor is in the network. You want to look for a plan that has low copays for when you go to the doctor. What is the copay when you go to the hospital? And you want to look to see that the plan has as low of out-of-pocket maximum as possible, which means all Medicare Advantage plans have a maximum out-of-pocket limit to limit what you are spending on the Part A and B services provided by that Advantage plan. Some plans that could be as high as $75.50. Well, if you can't afford $100 a month for a Medicare supplement, you probably can't afford to come out of pocket $7,550 on your Medicare Advantage plan if you have treatment for something like cancer or dialysis, right?
Wow.
And so you want to look for one that has a lower out-of-pocket maximum than that. And so those are some important things to be considered, knowing that with that Medicare Advantage plan, you may be able to afford the premium, but can you afford the expenses on the back end? That's something to look at.
And, the other thing, too, is what I'm noticing is a lot of these C plans, they're kind of gobbling up, like, if you live in Pennsylvania, Geisinger, or, New Jersey has theirs. And so a lot of the hospital networks have sort of coordinated. So even though it's a network, it's a pretty broad network. So if you're going to have a problem, you're probably going to be within those doctors anyway. Do you find that? Or, I guess the problem is if
that's
you have
right.
some specialty and you can go to Hackensack Meridian, but you can't go to whatever, hospital of the University
Yeah,
of Pennsylvania or something if you have cancer.
those networks will contract with the hospital systems like that, and so that often happens. And I usually tell clients interested in Advantage plans, it's pretty easy to find an Advantage plan that will suit you if you only have one or two providers. But if you see 7 or 8 different specialists, it can be difficult to find an Advantage plan that has all of those same doctors in the same network. So you have to look for the one that offers you the most of your providers as possible, and always also look at the drug component. That built-in Part D plan, does it have the medications that you really need in the formulary?
Oh, fantastic. So 65 is the age that people have to enroll in Medicare. What are certain, actually, we'll take a short break and we'll talk about what are exceptions to 65. Like, what if you're still working, you're 68, 69? Do you have to enroll in Medicare? What are some tricks with that? When we return, and we'll be talking more about some other Medicare mistakes you can't afford to make. So, folks, call us now, 888-988-JOSH, for the free review. Danielle's people have been gracious to offer also a consult if you want. Call us at 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-JOSH for that consult. And if you get the 45-minute Ultimate Financial Blueprint with us, we'll give you a copy of her book, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes You Can't Afford to Make. When we return, this is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial. And we're back. So, Danielle, we talked about, the magic age of 65, that's when most people enroll. But what if you work for a good employer? I don't know, let's say you work for IBM, and IBM still offers you health insurance or whatever till you retire. What do you do then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you're working for a large employer, as long as that employer has more than 20 employees, that group health insurance that you have with that employer, and this could be your employer or your spouse's employer, doesn't make any difference. When you have that health coverage, then that coverage is primary and Medicare is secondary. And most people in that scenario will enroll in Part A because Part A doesn't cost anything for most people. It's hospital coverage that can coordinate with your employer health coverage and might reduce some of the expenses you have to pay in the event of a hospital stay. So they'll enroll in Part A, but they will not enroll in Parts B and D because Part B has a premium. Most people pay $148.50 a month for Medicare Part B, and some people with higher incomes pay a lot more than that. So why would you want to pay that premium if you've got this great insurance from IBM or similar employer that already includes outpatient coverage? Same thing with Part D drugs. You don't really need that if your employer coverage covers medications, which of course most of them do.
So at 65, it's good to enroll for A, even if you have outside health insurance, just don't apply for B and D.
Yeah, if it's a large employer. It's really important. The distinction there is if you work for a small employer with less than 20 employees, Medicare is primary. So in that scenario, you need to enroll in both A and B right when you turn 65. But if it's that large employer, you could enroll in just Part A, skip Parts B and D. You won't have any late penalty as long as when that creditable coverage from your employer ends, you transition within a limited window of time to pick up the Part B, get yourself a drug plan. And of course, in that scenario, most people will pick up a Medigap plan as well. And so the only reason I would mention to you that you wouldn't want to enroll in Part A in that scenario is if that employer coverage is a high deductible plan and you are actively contributing into an HSA, you don't want to enroll in Part A then because Part A is considered another form of insurance and it would then make those contributions into your HSA illegal. So if you're doing that with that employer coverage, then don't enroll in anything. But if you have just ordinary employer coverage that's not HSA compatible, then Part A isn't going to hurt you and it could help you.
Now, I have a question from a listener friend. The Medicare question is, if a spouse is 67 and no longer working but is currently covered by the other spouse's companies, so there's a man, we'll call him Jack, he's 68, still working, still has his health insurance. Jill is 67, she's retiring, but she's currently covered by Jack's health insurance. Should they consider signing up for B, or is it still safe to wait until the spouse is no longer working and sign up when both would need to get coverage Part B and supplemental? So based on what you just said, I would say I'm going to pretend I'm you here, but basically it would be a waste to get Part B. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right. Unless there's a scenario where maybe your spouse's coverage has a $5,000 deductible and you're someone with rheumatoid arthritis and you have an injection once every 6 months, it's $800.
Okay.
So having Part B in that case could potentially pay for some of the expense that you might have for outpatient things like that type of in-doctor office injection. If you had a high deductible plan, maybe you would consider something like that. But most people don't need to pay for Part B when that outpatient coverage is covered by the group plan. As long as that deductible is reasonable, it's probably better in your interest to save the money that you would have spent on Part B. And then if you have expenses on the higher deductible plan, you've got that money set aside for that.
Now, and with this, and I want to go back to the HSA thing. The only way you can have an HSA if you're over 65 is if you don't have A or B?
You don't have any part of Medicare, so you would not enroll in A, B, or D. No Medicare enrollments whatsoever.
So basically, let's say you're working till you're 70. From 65 to 70, you would stay on your employer plan. You would do your HSA. You would have no part of Medicare. You retire at 70, you would then have how many months? 6 months to enroll? Or I forget.
Yeah, they'll actually give you up to 8 months to add Part B, but most people add it right away so that you're not running around without any outpatient coverage.
So at 70, you would sign up for A and B and maybe a Medigap plan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Man, this is amazing. We're getting, what's kind of cool, after having so many of you on over the years, Medicare, you start to there are some themes, it does get very overwhelming if it's the first time you ever hear it, but it really, there are some simple themes, right? If you have an employer, you can keep your coverage. If you're looking for a better plan, you get your G or your N. If you're looking for a budget plan, you go with this. There are kind of themes. Mm-hmm. What other themes am I missing so far?
We've talked about employer coverage and HSAs. The other one that I would say is you're making a decision whether to enroll in drug coverage or not. And the reason that this one comes up is, of course, you're going to have lots of people out there who turn 65. They may sign up for Medicare and Medigap, but they don't take any medications, or they take one or two medications that are generic and they use GoodRx and they get them for $1 at Walmart. And so they might be thinking, do I need to enroll in drug coverage with Medicare? And the answer is absolutely yes, for two reasons. Number one, if you don't enroll, for every month that you wait to enroll, you will incur a 1% penalty down the line when you finally do enroll, and you pay that penalty forever. So let's just say you were healthy at 65 and you decided not to enroll in Part D, and now you're turning 70 and you start having some medication, so you sign up for a plan. Well, you're going to have a 60% penalty every month on the premium that you're paying for the rest of your life, for as long as you're on Part D. So that penalty is cumulative, and it can really get you down the line if you wait too long. But perhaps an even bigger motive to go ahead and sign up for Part D is that in most states, you can find plans as low as $7 or $10 a month, and you cannot enroll in Part D in the middle of the year. So if you don't choose it right when you first enroll in Medicare, you have to wait all the way until the next annual election period to get an opportunity to get that. Well, what happens if you develop leukemia and you're prescribed a $5,000 a month oral chemotherapy medication? We can't choose when we get sick, and you may not be able to get into a drug plan until the following January, which can really dip into your savings if you have enough to cover a bill like that. And so why not just enroll in any inexpensive drug plan in your state so that you have some coverage for scenarios like that, and you can change the plan in the future if you develop a health condition down the line. And when you say drug plan,
you mean, so basically when you're 65, you get A and B. I guess some people are cheap and they say, I don't want to do any drug plan, and they just go 5 years without a drug plan?
Oh, yes, they do. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I just,
for $7, sign up for it.
It's like, why would you do that? It's like Medicare is pretty cheap, relatively speaking. You know,
it is.
Work a part-time job to afford the extra premium. Practice the phrase, welcome to Walmart. Do something. But I mean, if you think about it, your health care is probably one of your most expensive costs. Now, there's been talk about the changing of the retirement timeline from Medicare from 65 to 60. Do you have any updates on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm part of the National Association of Health Underwriters, and I sit on the Medicare Advisory Board there. And from what we hear in the lobbyists, from our lobbyist that meets with people in Congress, is that that's not as likely to pass. But if it did, it might be a scenario where you could be eligible to enroll in certain Medicare Advantage plans that you can take part of as early as age 60. And they're even talking about that you could use the subsidy through the ACA to help pay for those plans. But it doesn't seem like it's very likely to happen. The one that's probably more likely that's in consideration right now is the adding of dental, vision, or hearing benefits to Medicare because, of course, original Medicare came out in the 60s. And back then, it was not common for employers to cover things like dental, vision, and hearing. People paid for those out of pocket. Medicare didn't include them. But today, it is very common, and it's a complaint of people that enroll in Medicare at 65 and then say, well, what am I supposed to do about dental, vision, and hearing? They have to enroll in certain plans outside of that, standalone coverage for that. And this is something that has been proposed to Congress many times, and it's in serious consideration right now. And so we might see one or two of those things get rolled into Medicare going forward. That would probably increase the Part B premiums that beneficiaries pay, but I think overall it would be a welcome change.
Oh, fantastic. So, folks, we'll take our final break of the hour. We'll be back with concluding thoughts with Danielle Roberts, author of our featured book of the hour, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes You Can't Afford to Make. We'll talk about some more Medicare pitfalls as well. Folks, get the book. Call us now, 888-988-JOSH, when you schedule your no-obligation 45-minute retirement strategy session. We'll throw in the copy of the book, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes. And if you want the free consult from the people at Boomer Benefits, also let our office know, and we'll put you in touch with them. Call us now, 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-5674, 888-988-JOSH. And we're back with Danielle Roberts, co-founder of Boomer Benefits, a top producing insurance agency that serves tens of thousands of clients every year. So, Danielle, what other Medicare mistakes have we forgot to mention?
I think we've covered some of the most important ones, which are, don't skip Part D, make sure you enroll on time. We've covered the employer one, which is a big one. One that I like to tell people about that is not very well known and that people often don't think of is keeping the letter of creditable coverage from your employer and filing that away in a safe place when you transition to Medicare. So if you stay working past age 65, which many people do these days, you will leave that employer coverage at some point and transition to Medicare. About 2 weeks after the end of your coverage, the insurance company will mail you something called a letter of creditable coverage, which is going to show you proof that you had coverage from the time that you turned 65 until the time that you retired. You need to keep a copy of that because when you sign up for Part D, whether you do that alongside a Medigap plan or as part of a Medicare Advantage plan, you're going to get a letter right away from the carrier in the mail asking you, hey, we see that you're older than age 65. Did you have creditable coverage from any of these things since the time that you turned 65? Employer coverage, or maybe you have veterans benefits. There's several types of things that could be considered creditable coverage, but they can ask for a copy of that letter. And if you don't have that, they can penalize you, and then you'll have to appeal that, which can take months, all during the time that you're paying that Part D penalty that you don't really owe because you got that letter, you didn't know what it was, and you threw it out. So be on the lookout for that letter when you retire. You want to look for that very carefully, put it away in a safe place, and know that at some point your Part D carrier may ask for that, and you need to be able to provide proof of that creditable coverage that you had.
So that's why I'm a hoarder. You always hear these things, and the things you save, it's like that one thing that you throw out is the thing you're going to need. So
yeah, so true.
That's another tip. Be a hoarder. So on this 65 to 60, I had some guy on, he was on like a month ago. He really thought that was going to pass. What happened with that? I thought that was, he said it was like changing the retirement planning timeline forever. I'll tell you what, Medicare going from 65 to 60 sounds like a good idea, but like, how are we going to pay for it? Number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, I mean, this is just kind of it sounds like a great idea having Medicare at 60 because so many people from 60 to 65 have a gap. They're spending a lot of money on private health insurance. But to me, it's sort of like that Medicare prescription drug plan where everybody said, oh, this is a great thing in 2002. And then they said, oh, it's adding to the debt. But I've been hearing like that it's definitely going to happen. What changed?
You know, I'm not sure if it was something recent that changed or if this is just something kind of overall, because I heard the similar earlier in the year, but as it's gotten closer and closer to the time where these decisions are being made, I think it's finances. Adding Medicare on for another 5 years is going to be quite expensive, and we already have a budget that's in the trillions of dollars, right? And so adding that may be quite expensive. Now, I think a lot of brokers out there would be happy to see it because those are 5 years of additional people that we can sell products to. But of course, as a nation, Medicare taxpayers fund that, and it would be very expensive to add an additional 5 years worth of people to let people enroll earlier. So it remains to be seen, and it may still pass, but it seems like from the lobbyists that I've spoken with recently that it's not quite as sure as what they had thought maybe 6 to 8 months ago.
Yeah, the thing that I fear is like Medicare will go to 60 eventually. Then everybody will have Medicare. And then what everybody loves is Medicare will become some type of massively inferior coverage. And then you'll end up having like a 2-tiered hospital coverage, which would be a big disaster. I mean, having just went through COVID, and I'm fairly young, you know, it was like the red tape just to get the antibody therapy, you know, getting coughed on in the ER. It was horrible. So, well, thank you so much. Danielle Roberts, boomerbenefits.com, DanielleKRoberts.com. Her book, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes You Can't Afford to Make. And thanks so much for coming on. And we loved having you. Learned a ton. And folks, give us a call now, 888-988-JOSH, if you want the free book, 10 Costly Medicare Mistakes You Can't Afford to Make. And have a great day.
The preceding program was sponsored by the Jelensky Advisory Group.
Any awards, rankings, or recognition by unaffiliated third parties or publications, including 5-Star Wealth Manager, Advisory of the Year finalist by Senior Market Advisor, and Top of the $1 Million Roundtable, are in no way indicative of the advisor's future performance or any individual client's investment success. No award, ranking, or recognition should be construed as a current or past endorsement of Josh Jelensky or Wealth Quarterback LLC. Information regarding specific awards, rankings, or recognitions is available on the Wealth Quarterback website at www.jelensky.org. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. Investment strategies such as asset allocation, diversification, or rebalancing do not assure or guarantee better performance and cannot eliminate the risk of investment losses. There are no guarantees that a portfolio employing these or any other strategy will outperform a portfolio that does not engage in such strategies. This broadcast should not be construed by any client or prospective client as a solicitation to effect or attempt to effect transactions in securities or the rendering of personalized investment advice. Due to various factors, including changing market conditions, the information discussed in this broadcast may no longer be reflective of current positions or recommendations. While information presented is believed to be factual and up to date, Josh Jelensky and Wealth Quarterback do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. The tax and estate planning information discussed is general in nature, is provided for informational purposes only, and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Listeners should consult an attorney or tax professional regarding their specific legal or tax situation. Advisory services offered through Wealth Quarterback LLC.